Hello and welcome to another edition of another book review. This week I'll be reviewing Rian Hughes' science fiction novel XX. I'll talk very briefly about the author, go into a spoiler-free overview of the plot, talk about what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, who I'd recommend the book to, and finish off with what I will be reading for next time. Rian Hughes is a pretty well-known comic artist, mostly in the UK. He's been doing as an artist for comic books, 80, 2000, and a bunch of other stuff since the early 90s. He's worked with Grant Morrison and Mark Millar, among many, many others. He also has worked with a lot of fonts and typographic design. He's published books on just his own design work and typography, fonts that he's designed. So he's a fairly well-established artist. This is his first novel, XX, and this came out in 2020. He's since written another novel that I haven't read called The Black Locomotive. And this book is a little hard to define without or explain without spoiling. I'm going to try my best to make this spoiler-free. But what the book is, it's a first contact story and kind of revolves around two different groups of people. One of them is a startup company in London that is working on a video game system, or working with video games and working kind of the space between consciousness and virtual reality as it pertains to gaming, and they're called Intelligentsia. One of the three members of this startup company is a guy named Jack, who's formerly worked in the aeronautical and space industry, and he is able to very, very quickly take in information and kind of separate signal from noise is kind of what he is good at. And so this group comes across a signal that has been shot from outer space, and they soon kind of get into the mysteries of the signal, of where the signal is from, what the signal means, and they're the main characters of the book. Jack especially is one of probably two main characters, but that's one thread of the story. The other thread of the story is on the moon. There's an astronaut whose name is, I believe, Dana, and she comes into contact with what she believes to be an alien life form, and that is kind of the other thread of the story. And as the story goes along, those two threads kind of meet. And the book is very... I almost want to give kind of two different views, the novel and the book, because I kind of feel differently about them. The book is gorgeous, and clearly to the point of Rian Hughes having this background in art and this background in design, and this background in typography. The book has a ton of interstitial material. He plays around with white space throughout the book. He plays around with... There's several different documents within the book that are pertinent to the world in which it's taking place. He uses that to kind of comment on the outside world that are outside kind of these two groups of characters. There is, for instance, one of the characters, Jack, has he has purchased at this market a series of science fiction novels, and one of the interstitial pieces of material in the book is a novel kind of told in I would say really novella, told in 8 parts, that is in this book, XX. And it clearly is kind of commenting on the larger story, a la, if you've ever read Watchmen, Tale of the Black Freighter, and how that kind of comments on the overall story of the Watchmen characters and the universe in which it's taking place. You have something similar here with a science fiction novel or novella called Ascension. You have a Wikipedia page, you have documents that are kind of classified documents, and he kind of does a mock-up of those and everything. He has a transcript of an Oxford-style debate. He has the transcript of Dana being interrogated at one point in the novel. And all that stuff is done really, really, really well. And if you're looking for something that is a very, I think, unique look at the first contact story, I thought this was a very, very unique way of doing it. And I think that Rian Hughes, is sentence not a bad writer. I think he does a good job of making all the interstitial stuff really strong. I think in terms of he's able to, pitch his authorial voice enough to kind of capture the essence of whatever he's writing. I think he does that really well. It's a lot of interstitial material, and I think he does a good job of being able to switch it up and make that feel real whenever he does that. And I think the the science fiction novel is kind of one of the science fiction novel within the science fiction novel. The Ascension novel, I think, is kind of one of the best parts of the novel. If I was going to give it things that I didn't like as much, it's very, very, very long. And to that length, I think that there's a few things that I could contribute it to. I think personally, I kind of found myself slogging through the first half of the book much more than the second half. Once you get past the Ascension novel, the book moves much, much faster. For me, at least, it did. It took me almost a month to read the first half of the novel, and I feel that the reason for that is I didn't really feel myself invested in the characters, and he doesn't really do, in my opinion, a strong enough job getting you invested in these characters. You have kind of these outer events, and there's not really a lot of propulsion to the novel. There's not really a ticking time bomb that I felt in the novel to kind of push me forward. There's some characters who kind of come into the novel and then leave the novel, and you're like, well, couldn't you have like cut this character and save some space there? There's some material, the interstitial material, I think he's going for a feel or a sense of something, and it feels repetitive. And so it was hard for me in reading this to just like get through that first half, really. And like I said, I think there's a lot of invention here and a lot of cool ideas, and he does a great job of coming up with different fonts and different interstitial material. But part of me is like, I also think that that's kind of the downside of the novel, because I think it does slow it down. There's someone who wrote a review and basically said, is this basically a graphic novel? And I think it would have been an interesting book if he had done this straight as a graphic novel and how it would have changed. He wanted to write it as a novel, and so I'm glad that this novel exists, because I think it does push the form, and I think it does do a lot of different things that are interesting. But I think that ultimately, for me, the whole is not greater than the sum of the parts. There are parts of it that I really like. There's a part with Dana on the moon, and then you see also a Wikipedia page of that event, and I thought that was really, really cool and really, really well done. There's this weird sense that I had, though, in reading the book, that there's the outside world of the characters, and he uses some of this interstitial material to kind of build up the verisimilitude of the world, and it strangely didn't really feel like the outside world really ever intrudes on these characters, except for like maybe one exception. And even then, there's some plot points that are kind of confusing. The overall mystery of the book, I think, at times is a little confusing, of what exactly is going on, and he kind of keeps explaining it over and over again. And there are times where I'm like, I wish he had just maybe explained this once, and either I got it or I didn't. Now, but he's explained this so many times that it just kind of keeps getting muddled and muddled and muddled. But I do think the book is very inventive, and I think that it's a very interesting take on this story. And I think for people who are science fiction readers, especially if you're kind of more on the English version of science fiction, in terms of like ideas and the importance of ideas and where ideas come from and all that, the book spends a lot of time thinking about or talking about ideas and how the spreading of ideas and how that and culture and all those things, how those things work. And the book reminded me of, there's three books that it really reminded me of. If you can imagine like an English science fiction mashup of Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson, Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood, and House of Leaves. If you can kind of think of those three things and mash them together, that is kind of this book. I think it is more interesting than it is good, but I also think that for people who are fans of science fiction, I think it would be definitely something to check out. In terms of like content, who I would recommend it to, I would recommend this to like a college student who had time. And I get the sense that people got through the book a lot faster than I did. For some reason, like I said, the first half of it was really, really a slog, and it does pick up, I think, once kind of you understand kind of where the book is going. And he's not a bad writer sentence to sentence, but I did wish that there was something that kind of pushed me through the book or propelled me a little bit more. And like I said, there's a lot of things that I could have just cut. And I think that the book could have been a little slimmer. I don't think that's necessarily what he was going for. I think it is kind of a maximalist book on purpose. But I think from a readability standpoint, I think there were things that he could have cut pretty easily. And I don't think he would have missed a whole bunch. So that's XX by Rian Hughes. If you've read this book and have feelings about it, please be respectful. No spoilers, but feel free to leave them below. And until next time, I will be reading a book called Recoding America by Jennifer I think it's Pollock or Polka. Maybe it's Polka, and I apologize if I mispronounced that name. But please feel free to like the video if you haven't, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And until next time, bye.